Have you ever seen someone with two faces, or a man twice your height? For decades, freak shows showcased people like that, not as humans, but as spectacles. These shows were a booming form of entertainment from the 1840s until World War I, pulling in crowds eager to see what they believed were nature's mishaps. The entire idea was built around one thing: turning physical differences into profit. From real-life fairies to towering 8-foot giants, here are 15 of the creepiest circus freaks that actually lived, performed, and endured their own spotlighted ordeal. Number 15. Madame Gustika. Madame Gustika was the cruel stage name of a stunning woman from an Ethiopian tribe where lip-stretching marked both identity and beauty. Lip plates signified maturity, strength, and status, and Gustika had undergone this cultural rite long before ever stepping on stage. But in 1930s New York, she was paraded as a spectacle, a symbol of otherness. On April 12, 1930, she was famously photographed smoking a pipe on stage, an image that still echoes today, even in 2025. Her presence, though framed by colonialist misunderstanding, challenged Western audiences who had never seen non-European traditions. Her lip plate wasn't a deformity, it was dignity carved into custom. They looked at her with confusion, one writer noted, but she stood with pride. Though her story was flattened into a single image, Gustika herself never bowed to the narrative. She wasn't a circus freak. She was a living emblem of cultural power, torn from home but never stripped of self-worth. A beauty of resilience in a foreign and ferocious spotlight. Number 14. Thomas Weders. Thomas, sometimes called Wadhouse, was an 18th century English sideshow performer who earned global attention for a nose that stretched an astonishing 7.8 inches, the longest ever recorded. Born in Yorkshire, Thomas became a local sensation, using his facial anomaly to turn shock into a livelihood. His appearance may have stirred laughter or disbelief, but Thomas leaned into it, transforming a physical oddity into public currency. His fame eventually landed him a spot at Ripley's Believe It or Not, immortalized in wax. In a time when unusual bodies often lived in isolation or shame, Thomas stepped into the public eye boldly. "The man with the impossible nose," one headline read. Some described him as mentally simple, though these claims remain murky and unfair. What we do know, Thomas Weders didn't hide. He faced the world nose first, strange and unashamed. His name may be a historical footnote, but his legacy? It's a curious reminder of how society once measured worth by inches of difference. Number 13. Lalu Ramparad. Lalu, a native of Oud, was born with a parasitic twin attached to his chest. The undeveloped twin, sometimes dressed in a girl's clothes, had arms, legs, and a working penis, but lacked a head. Although Ramparad was Muslim, he was falsely billed as the happy, healthy Hindu during his time on the sideshow circuit. In 1888, a British showman discovered him and brought him to Europe. By 1891, Lalu was touring the United States and performing with major circuses like Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey. In 1905, while traveling to Mexico with the Norris and Roe Circus, he died in a train accident. His act drew both awe and discomfort, but he was remembered for his kindness and showmanship. Despite being reduced to a medical oddity in the eyes of many, Lalu lived on his own terms, traveling far from home and building a career from what others might have called a curse. His story remains a strange sideshow legend. Number 12. Elizabeth Green. Elizabeth Green, forever known as the Stork Woman, was born in the late 1800s with an unusually bird-like profile, sharp nose, slender jawline, long limbs. Promoters pounced, branding her with a nickname that followed her throughout her career. She performed for major shows like Ringling Brothers, often costumed in feathers to exaggerate her avian silhouette. But beneath the circus makeup was a woman of grit and sharp wit. Elizabeth managed her own pay, negotiated her terms, and kept full control of her image in an industry that rarely allowed women any. She looked like a bird, one colleague recalled, but ran her life like a lion. Off stage, she was known for her humor and independence. While others faded into side acts, Elizabeth stood out, carving not just a role, but a legacy. She wasn't just a performer. She was a woman who bent the rules and held the spotlight on her own terms. Call her strange if you want. She called it business. Number 11. George Liippard. George was born in Germany with not just one rare feature, but two working hearts and a fully formed third leg. The extra limb sprouted from his right pelvis, though only partially functional. Liippard insisted both hearts were confirmed by doctors, though skeptics remained. In the 1860s, he stepped into the limelight as the three-legged man, performing in circuses and dime museums across Europe and America. But George didn't just lean on spectacle. He told stories. He explained his condition with insight and calm, carrying himself with gentle pride. "He made you stare," a spectator once said, "but he made you listen too." As more extreme acts gained popularity, Liippard's fame faded. Tragically, he lost his extra leg to gangrene and lived out his final years in poverty. He died in 1906, largely forgotten. Yet his legacy endures, an unflinching portrait of a man who shared his rare biology with honesty and dignity in a world built on stairs. Number 10. World's largest lady and smallest man. In 1922, America's sideshow scene unveiled one of its most rare contrasts. Nellie Blanche Lane, weighing 642 pounds, beside Clarence Chesterfield Howerton, standing just 2 feet 4 inches tall. Billed as the world's largest woman and smallest man, their act became an instant draw. Clarence, then a child performer, later gained fame portraying a munchkin in The Wizard of Oz. Nellie, towering beside him, didn't just stun audiences, she charmed them. Together, they created a visual paradox that blurred wonder with discomfort. Their promotional photos weren't just ads, they were cultural snapshots engineered to shock and sell. Clarence continued acting and performing, but Nellie's life faded into silence. What remains is the unforgettable image of two extremes standing side by side, living proof of a time when difference was currency. They weren't just performers, one writer said. They were headlines in human form. In an age obsessed with spectacle, they became symbols, both celebrated and exploited by their own fame. Number 9. General Might. Francis Joseph Flynn, famously called General Might, was born in 1864 in New York and reached an adult height of just 21 inches. One of the tiniest men of his century, he began performing as a child, touring the US, UK, and Australia. Often dressed in military-style regalia and posed beside massive props, he amplified illusions of scale and spectacle. But beneath the showbiz exterior was a man full of wit and warmth. Tiny in frame, towering in spirit, one reporter wrote. In 1884, he married English dwarf Millie Edwards in a wedding that captivated newspapers across the globe. Their union defied gawking. It was sincere, defiant love. Later, Flynn settled in Australia, seeking calm after years of stage life. He passed away in 1898 from tuberculosis. Though short in stature, General Might stood tall in resilience, charm, and pride. He wasn't just an oddity, he was a pioneer, remembered not for his size, but for how he carried it. Number 8. Edward Mordrake. Edward was said to be a handsome, wealthy English nobleman cursed with a second face on the back of his head. While his normal face appeared pleasant, the other was described as grotesque and malicious. Stories claim the second face sneered when he cried and whispered to him at night, tormenting him with words from hell itself. The account says Mordrake was driven into despair, eventually taking his own life at 23, leaving behind instructions to have the devil's face destroyed after death. His story gained notoriety through Anomalies and Curiosities of Medicine, 1896, where respected physicians reported it as fact. In reality, Mordrake never existed. His tale was fiction, though conditions such as craniofacial duplication do occur rarely due to embryonic anomalies. Despite being debunked, Mordrake's legend endures, retold in books, theater, and modern television. His so-called demon twin continues to fascinate, proving how myths born in sideshow culture can outlive the performers themselves. Number 7. Gargantua. This wasn't just a gorilla. He was a business savior. Marketed as the world's most terrifying living creature, he revived the Ringling Brothers Circus from financial ruin in 1938. Born in the wild and once named Buddy, he was renamed Gargantua after the French literary giant, a title that matched his looming presence. Stories circulated that he despised humans, and the rumor fed the legend. Posters showed him snarling, and he was kept in isolation to maintain his aura of menace. A staged romance followed, with Mrs. Gargantua brought in for publicity, but he ignored her completely. Audiences didn't care if his ferocity was genuine or manufactured. He filled tents everywhere, not with tricks, but with presence. He wasn't trained to perform. He simply existed as a force of nature, danger caged and waiting. At a time when the circus was collapsing, Gargantua wasn't a performer. He was the raw spectacle that kept the show alive. Number 6. Yakob Nakan. Yakob Nakan was born in Dusseldorf in 1906 and grew to an astonishing 7 feet 3 inches, which earned him the nickname Germany's Giant. Before the horrors of war, he was already a beloved circus performer across Europe and the US, known not just for his height, but for his gentle nature. Drafted into the Wehrmacht during World War II, his combat role didn't last long. In 1944, near Calais, France, he surrendered to a British corporal named Bob Roberts, who stood just 5 feet 3. The photo of their encounter became legendary, a literal giant captured by a man half his size. After the war, Yakob moved to America and returned to the stage. Later, he became a department store Santa, using his height to bring joy rather than fear. He was never a monster, one friend said, just a giant with a soft heart. Yakob spent his life bridging two worlds, war and wonder, with humanity that outgrew even his towering frame. Number 5. Martin Joe Lorel. Martin Joe Lorel, famously known as the Man with the Revolving Head, the Human Owl, and Bobby the Boy with the Revolving Head, was born in Nuremberg in May 1885. He had a spinal condition that enabled him to rotate his head 180 degrees. When he twisted it, his spine visibly curved into the shape of a question mark. In 1921, he immigrated to the U.S. and began performing in sideshows, including Ripley's Believe It or Not, Ringling Brothers, and Barnum and Bailey. Aside from his head-turning stunt, he also trained dogs in gymnastics. Lorel couldn't breathe while rotating his head, but he could drink water with it fully twisted. During the 1930s, he regularly appeared at Robert Ripley's auditoriums and became a notable draw. Despite the physical strain, he continued performing well into later life. He passed away from a heart attack at age 70 and was cremated. Lorel's act was strange, unsettling, and unforgettable, just the way he intended. Number 4. Millie and Christine McCoy. Millie and Christine McCoy, conjoined twins, were born July 11, 1851, in Columbus County, North Carolina, to enslaved parents Jacob and Monamia, who belonged to blacksmith Jabez McKay. From birth, the sisters drew attention for being joined at the lower spine, sharing one pelvis, but each had 2 arms and 2 legs. In adulthood, they often described themselves as Millie Christine, a single person. Their owner sold them for $1,000 to a showman who planned to exhibit them. They eventually ended up under the control of Joseph Pearson Smith, a wealthy trader. The twins were abducted by another showman and displayed privately to physicians and select audiences before being returned to Smith. After the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, they were no longer enslaved, but chose to remain with the Smiths and continue performing. Marketed as singers rather than mere curiosities, they toured the US and Europe, building fame. Their story remains one of captivity turned into a career, tragedy reshaped into survival. Number 3. Ella Euing. Born in Missouri in 1872, Ella Euing eventually stood over 8 feet tall, earning the title of one of the tallest women in history. Diagnosed with gigantism, her extreme growth brought both physical pain and public fascination. Her parents initially refused to exploit her, but financial hardship changed that. By 18, Ella was performing at fairs and circus tents as the Missouri Giantess. Yet unlike many sideshow acts, Ella didn't lean into spectacle. She carried herself with poise, grace, and quiet strength. Dressed in custom-made gowns, she stood for hours, always kind, always composed. She built a home designed to fit her, high ceilings, giant furniture, a space where she didn't have to shrink herself. Though she never married, Ella led her life with dignity and independence. She died in 1913 from complications related to her condition. "People came to stare," one fan said, "but they left admiring her." Ella was a legend. Number 2. Prince Randian. Randian, often called the Snake Man or the Human Caterpillar, amazed people for years. He stood just 3 feet tall, with no arms and almost no legs, his body resembling a caterpillar. Dressed in a striped one-piece suit, he captivated crowds. Barnum, his showman, knew how to market his abilities. Randian could roll cigarettes, strike matches, shave, and even write, all using only his mouth. Watching him maneuver across the stage, the crowd was shocked, not just by his body but by his skill and confidence. He performed for more than 40 years, making a living on resilience and ingenuity. On December 19, 1934, after finishing a performance, Randian suffered a fatal heart attack. His death came only hours after leaving the stage. Despite a lifetime of exploitation, he had carved out his own identity, proving to audiences everywhere that ability often exists where most expect none. Randian's legacy remains inseparable from circus history. Number 1. Schlitzy Certise. Schlitzy was a mainstay in nearly every circus of the 20th century. Born with microcephaly in 1901, his head, skull, and brain remained underdeveloped. His real name might have been Simon Metz, but it never really mattered. He was just Schlitzy to the world. Raised in foster homes, he eventually entered the circus world and became famous despite only speaking in simple words and phrases. Audiences often mocked him, shouted slurs, and labeled him a freak. But he stood his ground. In 1932, he starred in the cult film Freaks. It was panned by critics, but the exposure made Schlitzy famous, briefly. The spotlight faded, but he kept performing. A chimp trainer named George Certise took him in and treated him like a son. After George's death, Schlitzy's health declined rapidly. He died shortly after in 1971. His life wasn't clean or easy, but he carved out a place in history. Schlitzy never asked for pity, only space to be seen. If you've enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in with us, and we'll see you very soon.